Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our Tanya. Sorry for the break last week. It was for good reason. And we'll get back to it now. We're middle of chapter 13 in Tanya. In your book, it's on page 57. So in chapter 13, Alter Rebbe explained some of the language that is used in the Talmud regarding the Beinoni and the Rasha, the sinful person, the righteous person, the tzaddik, and then the intermediate, the Beinoni. And he quotes the Talmud as saying that when it comes to the Beinoni, both the animals drive, meaning the Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Tov, the good inclination, and meaning the godly soul, and the animalistic soul, are both judges. They both judge the Beinoni. And he explained why does it use the language of judge? Because just like a judge, in this case, what he means is that they both give their opinion. They both voice their opinion. The animal soul says, let's do something self-centered. The godly soul says, let's do something God-centered. But they don't force it. They don't control the Beinoni. The animal soul doesn't control the Beinoni. He gives his opinion. He's there alive and well. But he doesn't ever get mastery over the Beinoni. In that sense, he's just a judge. He's an opinion giver. And if it were not for God, that helps the Beinoni to overcome and make and together with the godly soul rule on the issue, to make it 2 against 1, the Beinoni would never be able to overcome. You remember this? Okay. If you remember also, I want to correct myself. And I told you I'd look into this issue, and I did. If you remember, I asked the question, why does the Beinoni need godly assistance if by nature the mind rules the heart? If the Alter Rebbe already said in chapter 12 that naturally the mind has mastery over the heart by birth, by nature. So if there's a battle between the mind and the heart, which is the battle between the godly soul, which is in the mind, and the animal soul, which is in the heart, automatically the mind should control the heart, and you don't need outside assistance. You don't need a third assister, a helper, God. Why do you need God? Why all of a sudden in chapter 13 does the Alter Rebbe suddenly say that we need God's assistance? If in chapter 12 he said that by nature the godly soul, meaning the brain, is stronger than the animal soul. So I looked into this, and the Rebbe addresses this question. He explains as follows. I'll say it briefly, because he's talking about 2 different types of Beinoni, which means in chapter 12 he's talking about a Beinoni that has gone through, he davens his davening is a davening that is worthy. He develops and arouses within his heart a burning, flaming fire of love for Hashem during davening, and that carries him out through the day. Such a Beinoni his mind is fully aware of what's right and wrong. His mind he has a heart, in other words, his mind is godly soul. The place of the godly soul is in full is manifest there, and he has great love for Hashem as well. So that Beinoni is enough, the rule, the natural ascendancy, the natural strength of the mind over the heart. In chapter 13, he's talking about a Beinoni that has not experienced that love in his heart during davening. His davening is not as powerful and palpable as the Beinoni who does daven. See, he's lacking that fiery love in his heart that he has attained during davening. So this is a Beinoni that's on a lower level, so to say. Or that Beinoni needs God's assistance to overcome the temptations of the heart. The mind is not strong enough, it's not enough of a strength to overcome the passions of the heart. So over there he needs the determination of the mind, of course, but he needs a little bit of assistance from Hashem as well. So that's a simple answer. Then he talked about a third level of the Beini in chapter 13, and then he talked about a fourth level. There are 4 levels of Beini that the Alter Rebbe discusses over here. So I want to make that clear. In chapter 12 is one level, the Beini that davens, and he has a tremendous experience of love for Hashem during davening. He's on a good level. Chapter 13, he introduces a Beini that does not have the davening aspect as much as he would love. He's certainly a devoted Jew, and he never sins, but he needs God's assistance because he lacks that fiery love in his heart during davening. Then he talks about another Beinini. Both these Beinis that I just discussed are both Beinis that either one davens and has this tremendous experience during davening, the other doesn't, but after davening they both go to work. They both have a job, and they both are involved in worldly matters after davening. The third Beini he's talking about is a Beini that learns and davens all day. He learns the rest of the day. There's such a type of Beini too. He doesn't bother himself with a job. Somehow he has money, I don't know, he's able to live. Or maybe they pay him to learn. Whatever, maybe that's his job, to learn. So he's involved in the holy pursuits a whole day. So obviously such a person has less temptation, has less to deal with on a regular daily basis.
Less fight.
Less a fight, less a challenge, exactly.
Because he's fighting, he's in conflict at all times.
Who? Which one? The earlier two. You're right.
No,
You're right.
Doesn't need
this one also has a temptation. It's not like his heart is, his animal soul is not asleep. But because he's involved in davening all day, so his mind is in the right place, so it's a little easier for him. Then he's going to discuss the fourth Beini. And that is the Beini like the one that Rabbi thought he was. If you remember in chapter 1, Rabbi, the great sage of the Talmud, said, I'm the Beini. He gave himself as an example of a Beini. And the Alter Rebbe asked right away, how could he make such a mistake that he was a Beini? We know that he never stopped learning a minute. And he also knew that he didn't have any temptations for negative. The Beini has temptations for worldly, self-centered passion, right? Temptations. Rabbi knew that he didn't have those temptations. So what made him think that he's a Beini?
He was humble, number one.
Well, humble doesn't mean you fool yourself.
Yeah.
So he wasn't, he knew him. In other words, if he knows that a Beini is someone that has temptations, and a tzaddik is someone that no longer has temptations, he knows himself that he doesn't have temptations, so why would he say that he's a Beini? So Alter Rebbe said there's a fourth level Beini. The fourth level Beini is the Beini that is in the davening mode all day long.
Okay.
What does that mean? His love for Hashem, which is that what categorizes the Beini during davening, by him carries out through the whole day. Even when he's learning, he's full. He loves Hashem in a manifest. His love is manifest in his heart a whole day. It doesn't dissipate after davening.
Even when he's in the world.
Exactly. Rabbi wasn't in the world so much. He was learning davening. He learned more. He learned all the time. He never ceased learning. It said the Alter Rebbe quoted the Talmud where it says that the angel of death couldn't get a hold of him when it was time for him to die. The angel of death was sent to get him. And he came back to heaven and said, I can't get him. Why couldn't he get him? Because he doesn't stop learning. The angel of death cannot get you if you learn. He said, I can't get him. There's never a moment he stops learning. So he's a person that never stopped learning. So it wasn't like he was in worldly matters. But the Beini that we learned before, the third Beini that learns all day, doesn't mean he loves Hashem all day. Rabbi loved Hashem all day. So the reason he considered himself a Beini was because that love, he felt like, yeah, I'm in a state of davening all day. Doesn't mean my temptations are gone. Right now, it's asleep. What did we say happens to a Beini when he davens and he's in a passionate love for Hashem? During davening, his heart, his animalistic drives are kind of like silenced. Not killed, but silenced. He felt that was his situation all the time. When he would stop being in a state of love for Hashem, it would come back again. So he never felt himself like a tzaddik. A tzaddik is someone that got rid of his negative. Totally got rid of it. The Beini never got rid of it. While he's davening and he's in such a state of love, he doesn't feel it. But it doesn't mean it's not there. So Rabbi, in his humility, he really thought that I'm like the Beini that davens all day, which means I'm in that love a whole day, but I put it to sleep while I'm in love. The minute I'm not in love anymore, which could happen, he says it's right there again. So he never considered himself a tzaddik, although he was obviously a tzaddik. But the fact that he never felt a temptation for anything unholy was because he was in a 24-hour state of love for Hashem, like the Beini is during davening. So he thought he was a Beini, not a tzaddik. He never felt that he really got rid of his evil. He silenced it for now while he's in love with Hashem. But it could happen if he would stop being in that state, it would come right back. And that's how he felt he was. Of course, he wasn't a tzaddik. Rabbi was a great tzaddik.
So he was in 24-hour service.
He was in a 24-hour, not only service, but in a high-level service. The Bein is, every Bein is in 24-hour service, but it doesn't mean he feels that love for Hashem all day. Rabbi felt that love for Hashem all day. These are holy people. This is a whole different level. But he's just describing to you what is the Bein. Now he comes to the final point of chapter 13, which is where we started last week, or last time. We're on page 57. You clear, yeah?
Yeah.
Page 57 by that circle on the left column. Now, I began this already last time, but yet I will repeat a little bit what I said then. Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya for Jews who took their service of Hashem very, very serious. And they put their whole heart and soul into serving God. Yet, they came to him with a great dilemma. What was the dilemma? They're serving God. They feel a tremendous love for Hashem during davening. They're getting into it, and they overcome the struggle and so on. But at the end of the day, they come to the Alter Rebbe and say, Rebbe, we're lacking. What are we lacking? Our service is not real. Why is our service not real? Because it fluctuates. It's volatile. It's fluid, meaning it doesn't, and I feel a love for Hashem, then I don't feel a love for Hashem tomorrow morning, but I do feel that this isn't real. If it was real, it would penetrate, it would be there all the time. Emes. In Torah, there's something called emes. Emes means truth. If truth means, how you find, what's the definition of truth? That is there all the time. And here they're saying to the Alter Rebbe, we feel, when we daven, we do feel this love for Hashem, we feel it's real, but obviously it's not real, because then it goes away. So it's not really true, because if it was true, it would be there all the time. That's the definition of truth. So they come to, so here they are, putting everything they have, the whole heart and soul into serving Hashem, and at the end of the day, they realize it's all baloney. It's not even true. This perturbed them very, very much. This bothered them very much. Because serious people want to know that that it's for real. If it's not for real, what's wrong with me? So the Alter Rebbe addresses this question in the end of chapter 13, in the next half a page. And he says to them, basically says, that their service of God is also true. He consoles them so much consoling them. You're okay. That level of service that you have reached and attained, the level of the Beinoni, is also considered a true service of Hashem. But in order to understand this better, let me explain a little more. When we talk about truth, I would say there's 2 points that would define truth. In other words, you reached a true level of, let's say, love of Hashem. Okay? Truth would mean that it's always there. That was the first definition that we used. It's not today to here, tomorrow. It's not. That's not real, right? So truth means it's consistent. It's always there. And the next definition of truth is that you reached perfection, meaning You reach the most you can, the highest level that you can. As it calls it in Tanya, Aveda Tamu, a complete service, where there's nothing more after that. You can't reach higher. You reach your perfection. So there's two definitions of it. One is you reach your perfection, and one is that is the ultimate truth, which is really one is two sides of the same coin. Right? Did the Beini reach these two levels? So the Alter Rebbe is going to explain that, interestingly enough, he does consider them as having reached these two levels. You want to read it in the Alter Rebbe's words? Let's begin. It's on page 57. On the left column, towards the bottom, begins with the word now. Now, this quality of love of which we speak in the case of the Beinoni, the intermediate people, which is attained at the time of prayer, by virtue of the preponderance of the divine soul, etc. The divine soul is invested in his high, in his contemplation, and so on and so forth. And that causes him to reach this great love of Hashem, right? Mm-hmm. Is in comparison with the degree attained by the tzaddikim, by the righteous people who serve God in perfect truth, not called true service at all. Compared to the tzaddik, the Beini's love is not complete, is not true at all. It's not perfect. It's not true. It's not real. Since it passes and disappears after prayer. It's not consistent. And it is written, the lip of truth shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. So if it's only for a moment, it's not real, it's true, it's not a lying tongue, it's false. So compared to the level of truth of the tzaddik, the Beini's love is not real truth. It's not consistent, it's not there forever. Nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe says, in relation to the rank of the intermediate, with regard to the level of the Beinoni, the intermediate people, it is regarded as a truly perfect service.
In comparison to a normal person.
In comparison to the Beinoni. And from their level, it is considered truth. Why? Read that again. Nevertheless, in relation to the rank of the intermediate people, the Beinonim, it is regarded as a truly perfect service in terms of their love to their level of truth. In each man relative to his standing in the ranks of the intermediate. For in their case, too, their love during their prayers may be termed the lip of truth shall be established forever. How could you say it's forever? We said it dissipates after davening. So why would the Alter Rebbe say that in their case it could be considered forever? So he explains, since their divine soul has the power to reawaken this kind of love constantly.
So it's there.
It's there. You can awaken it all the time.
It's real.
It's real because you can always access it. You can always access it if you want it. So it's there. At the level of the Beinoni, that's called truth. Because what is the definition of truth? Let me get back to that for a moment. Definition of truth is, this becomes who you are. It becomes your identity. This truth becomes your identity. That's why it's always there. If it became your identity, it never goes away. I'll give you an example. Yeah, a human being. A human being is always a human being. You can go to a zoo and live in a cage with monkeys for 10 years. He's not going to turn into a monkey. He's truly a human being because his identity is human. He can act like an animal today till tomorrow, but he's a human. That'll never change. That's his truth. That's his identity. What's the identity? So truth is defined by your... If it's... In other words, truth gets... In other words, the idea of truth is that which you have attained became your identity. It became one with you. That's why it's always there. Why is it constant and consistent? Because that's who you became. That's truth. So let's talk about the tzaddik. What's the tzaddik's truth? He loves Hashem all day long. It never stops. That's his identity. He became one with his love of Hashem. The Beinoni didn't become one with his love of Hashem because after davening it's gone. So the Alter Rebbe says in comparison to the tzaddik, it's not truth at all. But now he says, with regard to the level of the Beinoni, it is considered truth. Why? Because his love became his identity. How so? He can always access it. He can always access it. It's never beyond his scope. It's never beyond his reach. That level of his service of God became the level of the Beinoni became his identity, which is he's always able to access that truth, to access that love, and in that sense, it's consistent. That's the truth of a Beinoni. Truth is not, when I say truth, every level has its center point where that becomes its truth. Not that truth is a relative. I want to make that very clear. Today in our world, today everything is relative. There's no real truth. It's not what we're talking about here. To make sure that you understand that.
What is the difference between the two truths of the tzaddik and the level of the Benoni?
The difference is like this. By the tzaddik, his truth is that it's always there revealed. That's the true level of a tzaddik. So if you're not there, you're not a tzaddik. And if you have love that's not constantly there, it's not true. For the tzaddik, that's not truth. For the tzaddik, that's not truth. Because what's the center point of the tzaddik? What's the essential level of the tzaddik? That he reached a level where his love is palpable all day long. It's pure and always there. So Beinoni comes along and says, I also love Hashem, but not at 10, 12 o'clock, only at 10 o'clock. You're not, that's called true. The tzaddik looks at him and says, this is below me, this is not real. From the tzaddik's level, that's false. But what's the Beinoni's essential point? What's the Beinoni's truth? For the Beinoni, every level has its truth. I gave you the example last week of a child that says Hashem is everywhere, right? Hashem is infinite. We say, what does it mean that Hashem is infinite? So you ask a 5-year-old, what does Hashem mean? What does it mean for Hashem? Hashem is infinite. Ask your grandson. He'll tell you that Hashem is in Australia, and he's in America, and he's in Israel, and he's in the moon, and all. He's everywhere. That's infinite. He's so big, he's everywhere. For me and you, that's not the meaning of infinite. Infinite doesn't mean that he's everywhere. On the contrary, when you say he's everywhere, you're limiting him already. He's in space. Infinite means he's not tied and bound by space at all. Everywhere means he's in space. You put him in space. No, I'm not. That's by an adult. That would be an aberration of the infinite. That would be a false understanding of infinite. Infinite means that he's beyond time and space. For a kid, that's true. When a kid says Hashem is everywhere and that's infinite, for him, that's a true level. That's his truth. You can't say, no, he's false. For you, it's false. For the kid, it's true. Because that's the best he can reach. That's his truth. So every level has its truth. So for the Beinoni, what's the Beinoni's truth? What became his identity? His love of Hashem became his identity, at least in terms of his ability to arouse it and to access it whenever he wants. And that's consistent. That he's able to do all the time. If he cannot do that, it's not real. For the Beinoni, it's not real.
Are you born a Beinoni?
No. You're born with the potential to be a Beinoni. But it takes hard work. Let's do it. Let's see the Alter Rebbe's words a little more, and then we'll explain even more. Nevertheless, the last line on the left column. Nevertheless, in relation to the rank of the intermediate people, it is regarded as a truly perfect service in terms of their love of truth, their level of truth. Each man relative to his standing in the ranks of the Beinoni, the intermediate. For in their case too, their love during their praise may be termed the lip of truth, shall be established forever, since their divine soul has the power to reawaken this kind of love constantly during its preponderance in time of prayer, day after day, by means of an appropriate mental preparation, each soul according to its intrinsic quality and rank. Since he's able to access it through good preparation of contemplating God's greatness, that's called truth for him. So the Alter Rebbe says two things of it. Number one, we define truth as two levels, right? Avodah Tama, it's a complete service, meaning he reached his maximum, and that it's consistent. Does the Beinoni have these two levels? Yes. He reached his maximum. He can't go beyond that. He can't reach the level of a tzaddik because he's not a tzaddik. He doesn't have the soul of a tzaddik. So in terms of his reaching perfection, he has reached the most he can.
So at the tzaddik level, nobody can be a tzaddik.
Not everyone can be a tzaddik.
You're
No.
born
You have to be born with that potential.
But you could be
a Beinoni,
everyone.
right? Yeah. So he's reached his ultimate level, but you still have a problem. It's not consistent. So the Alter Rebbe says, no, in the relation to the Beinoni, it is consistent. Because what's his the core essential level of the Beinoni? That he's able to access the love whenever he wants. He could. So he has both. So he has these two aspects, which make his service in the Alter Rebbe says, I can consider it a service of truth. Is that understood? Yes or no? Clear?
Mm-hmm.
And now he explains, because what he basically said over here, that it's true only for the Beinoni, but not for the tzaddik. For the tzaddik, that would be considered false. So he's taking, he's saying two opposite things almost. On the one hand, he's saying it's true, but for the Beinoni, but for the tzaddik, it's false. So he explains, because truth is, I want to be careful what I say, I don't want to say that truth is relative. But truth has every level has its truth relative to its rank. You understand? Like I said before, the 5-year-old has its truth, his truth, the 7-year-old has his, and every level has its point of truth. Let's see it in Alter Rebbe's words. This is the final point of chapter 13. For truth, we're in the middle of the right column. For truth is the attribute of Jacob, who is called the middle bolt, which secures everything from end to end. What he's talking about over here is, in the Torah, in the description of the building of the Mishkan, they built the Mishkan with planks of wood. And each plank was about this thick, maybe a little less, and 15 feet high, a square of about 1.5 to 2 feet, and they will now put one near the other. How do you attach these planks? It was 30 amas in each, 20 amas in each direction, or 30 amas in each direction, which is about 45 feet. How do you attach these planks, these 20 planks? So they had crossbars. So they had different types of bars that connected them. If you take a look in the pictures of the Mishkan, you had on the outside, you had 4 bars. One bar each bar was 10 feet. So you had 2 bars and another 2 bars, right? 10 feet and 10 feet, 10 feet and 10 feet. And that they connected it with bolts, with the screws, and that's how they kept the walls together. But then they had one other bolt, one center bolt. That was a miraculous bolt, by the way. Because the Mishkan had 3 walls, right? 1, 2, 3. Right? So they had 4 bars on each side on the outside, right? That kept the walls as much as they can together, and the back as well. But then there was a bar, they drilled a hole through the middle of each plank, all the way through there, and all the way back the other side. And this bar was put through the whole Mishkan. It made a left turn miraculously. It says the bar made a left turn miraculously, and then another left. It went through the whole thing from the middle point. That's how it was. It's called the Bria Chatichein, the middle bolt, the middle bar, the middle bar that went through the whole Mishkan. So if you think about it, it was 30 amas this way, 10 amas that way, and another 30. 20, 10, and 20. 50 amas long. And it was put in, it went through plank by plank, and then miraculously it turned, and again, and it was pushed through, and that kept the whole thing together, obviously. The Alter Rebbe, why is the Alter Rebbe bringing this thing in Tanya here? He's saying the midah of emes is that middle bar. that middle, goes through it goes through the center point of every level.
From end to end.
It went in the Mishkan, but in relation to what the Alter Rebbe is talking about over here, every level has a center point. And emes goes through the center point of every level. The center point of every level is its truth.
Okay.
So emes is like that middle bolt that goes from top to bottom, from the highest level to the lowest, and reaches to the essential middle point of every level, and that's its truth. So for a 5-year-old, what's its truth? God is everywhere. For the 25-year-old, saying God is everywhere is a limitation, not an infinite level. It's the opposite. It will take away from God's infinity. So you understand, every level, the center point is its truth. So what's the center point of what's the center point? It's identity. What's the identity of the tzaddik? Loves Hashem full time, all the time. That's its truth. The Beinani potentially loves Hashem all. That's its center point. That's its truth. So every level has its truth, and it's its center point. And this middle bolt is the midah of emes. By the way, I will share with you an interesting fact. That emes makes up what letters? What are the letters of the word emes? Truth. Aleph, Mem, Tov. If you know the Aleph, Mem, Tav. Emet. The Aleph is the first letter of the alphabet. The Tov is the last letter of the alphabet, and the middle is the middle letter of the alphabet. It goes from beginning through the middle all the way to the end. Emes has to penetrate every level to the middle point, through and through. If it's not through and through, it's not emes. Emes has to go through and through.
Can you talk a little bit about Jacob?
In a minute, yeah. And sheker, by the way, what's sheker?
The opposite?
Yeah, that's not the opposite in terms of the letters, but emes, if you take the 3 letters of emes, they're all, the aleph has 2 feet, right? The aleph has 2 legs. The mem has a solid bottom leg. And the tov has 2 legs again. What does sheker have? Sheker ein lo raglain. The Talmud says sheker has no legs. The shin is a point.
That's right.
The kuf is a point. And the reish is 1 leg. Is 1 point. They wobble. They can't stand. Falsehood can never stand. Emes penetrates through and through. It's always there. It stands on. It's on solid ground, so to say. Emes is on solid ground. It's always there. It's consistent. Sheker ein liraglaim. The letters of sheker have no legs. Then they fall apart. A lie can never stand. Can never survive. It's not consistent. It will never survive.
It's very true. Shame on us that we know it on 50 years old.
That's the difference between emes and sheker.
Wow.
So the Alter Rebbe says every level has its emes, because emes goes from aleph through mem through tov. It goes from beginning to end. The middle point of every level, that's its truth. The essential point of every level, its identity, that's its truth. So the truth for the 5-year-old is not the truth for the 25-year-old. The truth for the Beinani is not the truth for the tzaddik. So from in terms of the tzaddik, he looks at the Beinani's truth, that's false. But for the Beinani, it's true. Because truth penetrates the middle point of every level. Huh? So now let's read it inside, and we'll conclude, and we'll talk a little bit about Jacob. Jacob, let's talk about Jacob before. You asked, I'll answer. What does it say about why is Jacob more true than Abraham and Isaac? It's interesting. But it says in Kabbalah, it's explained that Abraham had 2 children, right? Mm-hmm. Who were the 2 children? He had more, but these are the 2 famous ones. It was Yitzchak and Yishmael. Mm-hmm. In other words, Avram's truth, Avram's service of Hashem did not penetrate all his children. He didn't give it over to all his children. Went to Yitzchak, but Yishmael, Yotza mimeni Yishmael. Yishmael didn't take to it. Right? Didn't take to it. Yitzchak had 2 children. Who were they? Yaakov and Esav. Same thing. Yaakov with Yaakov, he had tremendous success. Esav, no, he didn't have success. What does it say about Yaakov? Mitato shlema. His bed was complete. All his 12 children were 100% tzaddikim like he was. The 12 Shvatim, the 12
When
tribes.
they reached that level.
Yeah, they all became the Jewish people. They all continued the path of Yaakov. That's truth. If it doesn't go through and through to all your children, it lacks something. There's something lacking. It's not complete truth. Doesn't mean that Avram was false. God forbid to say such a thing. But Yaakov represented the attribute of truth more than the other two of our patriarchs, and that's why it penetrated all his children. It was consistent through every one of his offspring, and they all became the 12 tribes, the Jewish people. Whereas Yaakov, Avram, Yotzim Mimenu Yishmael, and Yitzchak Yotzim Mimenu Esav. Avram gave also. It wasn't fully truth. It's a what? Let's go one more. Let me elaborate on this a little bit more. What was Avram's main, so to say, his level of service? What defined Avram? Chesed. Kindness. That was his thing. Kindness. What defined Yitzchak's? Gevura. Yeah, Gevura means judgment. So let me explain how that expressed itself. You look in the Torah about Avram. What did he do? He did chesed to everyone. He was always kind to everyone. He would it says that when he gave the hospitality to those three angels, in the beginning of the portion of Vayera, if you remember that story, who were these three people? They looked like people. Angels. And they looked like, they were angels, but they didn't appear as angels. They appeared as people. Who? Arabians that were idol worshippers, it says. He thought that they were Arabian idol worshippers. Yet he gave them everything. He gave them food and lodging. He gave kindness to everyone. Is that a good thing?
Absolutely.
It's a great thing, right? But so let me ask, if you're always kind, yeah? Is that a good thing? If your kid comes to you and says, I'd like to have about 30 lollipops now. Could you give it to me? Sure. Yeah, here, I'm kind. Give you 30 lollipops. Then the next thing you know, you're going to be at the dentist's office. And he's going to drill his teeth and he's going to start crying. It's kind, but it's not so good. You have to limit your kindness. Kindness, unadulterated kindness, is not real. Is not good. It ultimately leads to some problems. Avram's unadulterated kindness led to problems. What was the problem? Yishmael. It led to Yishmael, who abused the kindness and became Yishmael.
But can we blame Abraham? Maybe Sarah is the one to blame.
No. It's not a question of blame. We're not here to blame. We're talking about what's the reality of this level of service. In that sense, it's not 100% emes. It's too much. What is Yitzchak? The opposite. Yitzchak is Gevura, identified with prayer, which means to hold back, give measured, not so simple, you have to deserve, you can't just get. But he went to the other extreme. Out came Yitzchak, Yaakov, of course, but also an Esav. An Esav was the result of unadulterated Gevura. Unbalanced chesed doesn't lead to good, and unbalanced Gevura doesn't lead to good. Yaakov, it says, was the midah of tiferes, of rachamim, of compassion. What's compassion? In other words, from chesed's point of view, when Avram say he's chesed, what does that mean? Everyone's deserving. Yeah, give. Everyone deserves. No one is. Just give to everyone. No, everyone is deserving. Is that true? Everyone's deserving? Of course not. Said it's not 100% real. It's not 100% true. What do you mean everyone is deserved? Yaakov was so kind that in his mind everyone deserved. By Yitzchak, no one deserves. You have to be at mamish. You have to really convince him that you deserve. What is compassion? Compassion means, I know you don't deserve, but I'm going to have compassion anyway. It's the balance between chesed and gevura. It's not unadulterated chesed, it's not unadulterated gevura. It's somewhere in the middle. It's a balance of both. It's truth. That's the real truth. That's the true level. That's balanced. You decipher, you get away all the and you make and you balance it out. Rachamim doesn't mean that you don't deserve, that you deserve. If you deserve it, it's not rachamim. You deserve. When you say you give your employees at the end of the week a check, a paycheck, you're compassionate to them. That's not compassion. You owe it to them. They deserve the money. You have to give it to them. When you think everyone deserves, it's not compassion. Compassion means, even though I know you don't deserve this, I'll give you a bonus. You don't deserve this. You didn't work for this, but I'll give you anyway. It means it's a balance between chesed and gvura. What is it? Identified with Torah. Avraham was chesed, Yitzchak was aveda, tefillah, and Yaakov was the idea of, I'm sorry, let me translate this in English. Yaakov was kindness, gemilut chasadim, acts of kindness. Yitzchak represented aveda, which is prayer, and Yaakov represented Torah. Torah is emes. The Torah is the Torah of truth. So Yaakov's level represented truth, and that's why no negative consequences came from him. All his children became the prodigy of Yaakov.
It didn't extend to the whole Jewish people.
It did.
But look what happened to the 10 tribes.
What happened to the 10 tribes?
They became idol worshippers and everything. I mean, they were...
No, I'm talking about his own kids. We're talking
I know,
about his
but later on, but I thought Jacob
They
was really
reached the
supposed to
level
go
of
through
perfection.
all the Jewish
It
people.
does, because the neshama, because from Yaakov came, every
The
single
perfect.
person that came from Yaakov got a neshama.
I got in the Shama.
Got a neshama. You have a good question. How could they have sold Joseph? Yeah, he is a good question. Even his own children did something terrible.
Yeah.
When you look into the Hasidic and Kabbalistic works on this topic of the sale of Joseph, you hear a whole different story.
But one
They
of them
did that
slept with
because
his
of their
father's
holy
wife.
level. They did that because of their holy level.
What about Reuben? It's not
Reuben
holy
the
to
same.
sleep with your father's wife. That's very unholy.
It doesn't say that he slept with her. It says
No, it just says
he moved his
moved
bed into the tent of Jacob.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go now and explain
But
every
I-
action of this
But they
tribe.
cleaned themselves. They reached to the Sadiqian level. They were
Yeah.
born with it, but they became Sadiqian 100%.
Right.
100%
Right,
of the time.
they did, yeah.
That's
That's
what I
true.
feel.
Now, the fact that you're asking a question that it says in the Torah that he slept with his father's wife, so over there, when you look at the commentaries, it doesn't mean that he actually slept. It means that he moved her bed.
Why did he lose the firstborn right? It was because of that.
Right, he offended his father, but then he didn't actually do that.
Because
Did-
if Jacob was...
but the point is, my point, let me just briefly say, every single thing you'll read in the Torah about them was done from a holy
Christian
motive
perspective.
and from a spiritual. The fact that they sold Joseph was because they felt that Joseph was a threat to Judaism. They felt that he was a threat to Judaism.
How can that be?
There's
I'm not going to judge. I wasn't there.
No. It's explained. This is not the time to say it. Maybe after we finish chapter 13, I'll explain to you this idea. But the point is that Yaakov's level, and he penetrated. He was consistent through all his kids.
And all
Became
his children.
the father of the Jewish people.
That's true.
All the children, they became Shiftei Kah, the tribes of God, because he was emes. Emes is consistent. That's the idea. So that's what he's saying over here. Now let's finish it up. For truth is the attribute of Jacob, who is called, Yaakov is called the Briach Hatich, in the middle bolt, which secures everything from end to end, from the highest gradations and degrees to the end of all grades. And in each gradation and plane is fixed its bolt. And in each gradation and plane, it fixes its bolts through the most central point, the emes point. That central point, which is the point and quality of its attribute of truth. That's where Jacob is found. In other words, the point is, in every level there's that center point, which it's truth. The attribute of truth is an unbounded inheritance, which has no limit upward to the highest degrees, while all lower gradations and degrees are as nothing compared with those that are superior to them. In other words, when you look from the higher levels, the lower levels don't look like truth at all. From the tzaddik's perspective, Beini is not truth. But from the level of the Beini is truth. Because its center point, that level of truth penetrates the center point of every level. It goes from the highest to the lowest. So from the highest, when you're looking down, that doesn't look like truth at all. But from the level of that, from the lower level, its center point is its truth. And Yaakov's midas ha'emes, his attribute of truth, penetrates every level. So the Beinoni is davening. Beinoni davens every day, and he feels this powerful love. Then it dissipates, he can come and daven mincha and bring her right out of back from its. That's its center point. What's the central point of the Beinoni? It's accessible all the time. It's not revealed. By the tzaddik, emes means revealed all the time. By the Beinoni, truth is that it's accessible all the time. And if it's not accessible all the time, then you're not a Beinoni. You're right, that's not truth. So the middle point of the center point, meaning the essential level of every level, is its truth. What's by the Beinoni? Its level of truth is that it's able to be accessed whenever it wants. That's its perfection. As is known to those who are familiar with the esoteric discipline, that the quality which is at its, as it were, the head and intellect of lower grades is inferior to the so-called souls and feet of the grades above them. In other words, above a level, imagine, just to give you an example, if you have a real tall ladder that's 100 feet in the air, and you have 10 people on the ladder, right? And every 10 feet you have another person, right? First one climbed up, second one climbed up behind him, the third, right? The person that's above, his feet soles are higher than the head of the person below, right? His feet are higher than the head of the next person. And so, in all the way. In emes, it works that way also. Emes goes from the highest level to the lowest. There's a point of truth in every level, right? We said that. We explained that. The higher level truth looks at the lower level. It's garnished. It's nothing. That's inferior. Level. That's true. It's inferior. It's not even truth. It's false. You're right. From that level, this is false. But from this level, this is truth. So he says, let's read those words again. The attribute of truth, about 8-9 lines from the bottom over here on page 57. The attribute of truth is an unbounded inheritance, is infinite, from every level has its truth.
No limits.
Which has no limit upward to the highest degrees, while all lower gradations and degrees are as nothing compared with those that are superior to them. As is known to those who are familiar with the esoteric discipline, that the quality, which is, as it were, the head and intellect of the lower grades, the head of the lower grade is lower than the foot soles of the higher grade, is inferior to the so-called soles and feet of the grades above them. Compare the statement of our sages, the feet of the highest measure up to all. What he's saying is, the level of the tzaddik which is up here is that level of truth. When you look at the next level of truth, this is not truth at all. The lowest part of this level is higher than the highest part of this level. And therefore this is all completely nothing compared to that. But that's only compared to that. Compared to this, it's true.
How come compared to us?
What's our truth?
Right. How can I become my truth? I'm not a tzaddik.
It's a good question.
How will be the application to us?
Your truth.
I cannot look at somebody who's holy or somebody who's...
No, you have to look at your level.
Uh-huh.
So the truth is like this. The level of the Rasha is false. The Rasha is a Rasha, sinful person. Sinfulness is not true.
100%.
But you remember I said to you last week, and many times already, that you could be a Beinoni in certain respects. Right now, let's take a person, that has never been educated in Torah, never been educated in anything. He has no idea what Torah is, spirituality, God, nothing. He came from his father and mother, never gave him any education. Then he finally, when he's 40 years old, he comes to a recognition, a realization, I am Jewish. My parents never sent me to Hebrew school or to Jewish school. They never taught me about Shabbos, about kashrus, about anything. And suddenly I'm here, I'm 40 years old, I know nothing. He goes to the rabbi and he says, Rabbi, he goes to the Chabad, says, I need to learn. He starts learning. And he starts learning from Genesis, Numbers. He starts learning Halacha, Jewish law, Shabbos, kashrus. Is this person able to become a religious Jew in 1
No.
week?
It'll be false.
It's impossible. It's not real. It's gonna, it'll be too much. What's his emes at that moment? What's his truth? What's the right path for him? To take on one mitzvah at a time, right? So let's say which mitzvah is he going to start doing? He'll start saying Meida Ani every morning. Start the morning prayer, thanking God for waking him up. Okay, that's what he's starting with. If he does that every day, that's his truth. With that one thing, be consistent. If the Beni looks at that person, that's the truth. This is a joke. For the Beni, it's a joke. But for this person, it's not a joke. That person, that's his truth. He's consistent in his one mitzvah that he was able to take on at this station in his life. But if he gets stuck at that mitzvah for 15 years, that's no good. And he's not truth. It's truth for today. But as you learn, so for us, what's for us truth? Be a beinin in one mitzvah. Be consistent in one mitzvah. Be consistent with what you're doing. Oh, this week I'm lighting Shabbos Gan, next week I forgot, the week after I'm almost forgotten, next week I'm going to try. That's not truth. Take a mitzvah and be consistent through and through. That's
Thank
your
you.
truth. That is your truth. Truth means consistency. And it means also the completeness. The Beinoni can't reach the Tzaddik's level. See, he can reach only the Beinoni's level. It's complete for him, and it's true for him. What's for you? You reach your completion right now. Right now, I don't know anything. The rabbi is starting to teach me from beginning. Right now, my aleph, the first letter of the alphabet, is my truth. My first mitzvah, that's my truth. But if a Beinoni could become a tzaddik and stops short and doesn't become a tzaddik, not true. So if you can take on a mitzvah a month later and you don't, sorry, that's not true anymore. It was good for a month, not for the second month. That truth of the first month becomes now false for the second month. I'm not saying it has to be a month. I'm saying your honest, an honest evaluation of yourself. We have to be honest with ourselves. The first thing about truth is to be truthful with yourself. Where am I? Where's my station in life with God? What am I capable of doing? Figure it out, and then start doing it and be consistent. That's your truth. That's your truth. The point over here, the Alter Rebbe is saying consistency. For the Beinoni, his consistency means he can access the love of Hashem every day. Trust me, when the Alter Rebbe finished chapter 13, he calmed down thousands of Jews. They finally felt validated. My service of God is real. They really felt that they were lacking, that they were nobodies. So he tells me, you're right, compared to the tzaddik, you're nobody. That's not considered truth. But compared to the Beinoni, you're perfect. That's perfect, that's truth. So this is the point that we have to internalize our own truth. This is very important for people to understand. Don't try to be someone else. Reb Zusha once said, the great Reb Zusha of Anipol, he said, when I get to heaven, no one's going to ask me why I didn't behave like the Baal Shem Tov. They're going to ask me why I didn't behave like Zusha. They're going to ask me, why didn't you reach your perfection, not someone else's perfection? They're not going to compare me to the Baal Shem Tov. The Beinoni is never going to be compared to the tzaddik, because he couldn't be a Beinoni, the tzaddik. When you get to heaven, they're not going to ask you, why weren't you a tzaddik? They're going to ask you, why weren't you a Beinoni? They're not going to ask you, why didn't you reach the truth of the higher level? Because you can't. Their feet is higher than your head. You can't even get there. Forget about that. But with your level, you could reach perfection and preach truth. And that's where you have to be. That's where they're going to hold you accountable. So what's your level today on July 9th, 2017? Each of you have to ask ourselves. We each of us have to ask ourselves, what is my real level today? What is expected of me today? And be consistent with that. It's consistency. That's truth. Alter Rebbe lays down a very fascinating truth here. No pun intended. A fascinating truth. Fascinating truth. That truth is at every level its center point. Yaakov is the middle bolt that goes from the highest down to the lowest and hits the middle point, and that's its truth. Emes is Aleph Mem Tov. Emes Yesh Le Raglayim, the two legs of the Aleph, the solid leg of the Mem, and the two legs of the Tov. It's on solid ground. It's consistent. It doesn't fall so fast. Sheker Ein Le Raglayim. Sheker has no legs. It's false. So it's time to become truthful with ourselves. At your level. Don't try to be someone else's truth. Try to figure out your truth. Trust me, if people did that, we would be in a whole different situation. They'd be happy. They'd be, they would be real. And they wouldn't have all the anxieties that so many of us have. We're trying to be someone else. Don't try to be someone else. Alter Rebbe is saying to the Beinini, don't try to be the tzaddik. It's not your truth. You're right, the tzaddik looks at you, you're nobody. You're right, that's not truth for the tzaddik. It's false, but for you it's truth. And this theme will repeat itself through Tanya. Tells the Bein, don't try to be the tzaddik. You can't, that's not for you. Be real with yourself. We'll continue with 14 next week.